have all three of us today. So I'm very excited to have Anna and Teresa be able to join me in this didactic presentation. So today we're going to wrap up as we're in our final session of Project Echo, talking, we're just finishing up with the sustained conversation. We talked about that last time, spread and celebrate quality improvement success. So again, the important piece that we talked about before, but the three important steps. So now you're, a lot of you have done your work on this project. It's ongoing, it's sustainable, you have new workflows in place. And you can tell by the data that, again, it's been an incredible success. And so we want to sustain this work as this Echo wraps up, just because the Echo ends, that doesn't mean this focus and printing those lists and working on those lists and outreaching to patients and all those things that you've started to do. Then maybe you did that with your 13-year-olds, but maybe you've never done it with your 11 and 12-year-olds. We would want that to continue. Spread this work, which is, Teresa's going to talk a little bit about that, and then celebrating, which Anna's going to talk about for her component of this. So next slide. So again, looking at sustainability, really the part two, I call of that piece is really resiliency. So the definition of resiliency, there's really two pieces to it. It's the ability of something to return to its original size and shape after being compressed or deformed, not really as applicable to us. The second one is an ability to cover from or adjust easily to adversity or change. And you can see I bolded change, right? So that is a huge component of resiliency and really successful in this work is, right, being open to change, being ready to try new things, being innovative. And that's how we find new successes that we can build and will impact this work. Next slide. So if we can adjust easily, right, we can be open to change, then we will accelerate the acceptance of innovative quality improvement ideas. Remember, the overall goal of quality improvement is increasing the quality of care for our patients, right? Why we do this work. And really important resiliency is the need to take care of each other in this work and support each other in this work, as well as taking care of ourselves, right? We know that this is not easy work, and we need to make sure that, we understand why it's so important and really supporting each other as we move forward in quality improvement. Next slide. This is one of my favorite models. It's Rogers' Diffusion of Innovation. It really talks about, this isn't going to be a surprise, I think, to people, and many of you may be very familiar with this, and you can nod your head if you are, but, really the way, if we really want to make change, is you really want to engage those innovators and early adopters. Because if you look at this, you'll see the majority, right, on that bell curve, are the early majority and late majority, and then you have the laggards that, will come along once everyone else has kind of done their thing. And really a lot of, looking into this and kind of preparing for the presentation, a lot of people will refer to this within healthcare and really getting those innovators and early adapters. So in this work, to me, that really rolls into HPV champions, those providers, those staff that really embrace this work and are open to trying things, even if it's just one provider and an MA team, right? Let's just try something. Let's do a small little PDSA. Let's do a small test of change. And then once people see that work, then everybody else gets on board and we're able to spread that. So really important to remember that in quality improvement for all of us in this work. Next slide. So again, to continue to increase your HPV vaccination rates, be resilient, be innovative. Don't be afraid to try new things. Once you're successful, sustain and standardize this work. So again, for those of you that have multiple practices, so you may not have all practices engaged in this project. So now that you have these workflows in place, you're seeing the data, you can share those pieces, like Teresa said, sharing them at staff meeting and starting to spread this to other parts of your organization. And really looking at that, I think, no matter, even if you're just one practice or a group of practices, this pertains to everyone. So next slide. So now I'm going to just turn it over to Teresa. So she's going to just kind of take what I just said and really put that into context and into real life within practice. So Teresa, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Great, thanks. So just sort of following up with what Jess just talked a little bit about, so sort of sustaining your work, the next sort of thing is to spread your story and to spread the news of your success. So I think sometimes we get caught up in the work, right? The workflow that we put in place, and we don't always step back to sort of look at our success and then to share it with all of the people who can get really energized and engaged with what they've done. So the first part is, the team that you all worked with that sort of identified the PDSA that you worked on, or many PDSAs that you've done for this project. give that data back to them. It can be super engaging for them. If you've been doing quality for any length of time, it takes sometimes a long time to see improvement. And so we need our energy in doing that work. And the way we get our energy and get re-energized is by seeing the results and sort of the fruits of our labor. So, share the success with your quality team. Share it with the staff and the providers that you've encouraged to change, right? So all of the PDSAs you've done have required some form of change. And so sharing your results and your success with them can again remind them why it was important, and then engage them to want to continue to do better. Also, the leadership team of the practice that you might have done this work with, again, it's sometimes hard to get buy-in from leadership to do this work, to spend our resources, to spend our time. And so reminding them of why it was important and what we accomplished, and again, our story can be can garner more buy-in to continue and to spread, which Anna will talk about. Also, if you're thinking of spreading this across your organization, which I encourage you to think about doing, it's super important to share these results, this success, with your leadership team of other practices. Again, it's a way to get buy-in from them that this is a worthwhile project and important to the patients and the families we take care of. And then the leadership team of the organization, right? So if it comes from the top, if everyone embraces this as a project and it's worthwhile and it's super important, and the leadership team is behind all of us, it makes it easy for us to invest our money and our resources and our time in projects like this. And then also I encourage you to think about ways to share it with your patients, right? Super important that we talk about our need and our want, our desire to sort of improve the care for them. And so by being able to share that information with them shows that we care about them and we really want what's best for them in improving their overall care. And then if you have a board of directors here at my organization, we do, I share this information with our quality board. Again, it re-energizes them. They're in the community. They can, sort of tout good things about us as an organization if they hear from other people. And it shares our success and energizes them to be behind our mission. So I encourage you to think about ways in which you might spread your news. And of course, all of those different audiences, the way in which you present the data might look different. It might be the exact same or it might be a little different. So you may want to think about that. And then now that you've identified some of the best practices, you've heard from many of your peers on these calls, you've tried your own tests of change and have had obviously super success based on what we just saw. It's time for you to think about spreading that, right? So it could be spreading the PDSA that you implemented to another pot of providers, so maybe a different group of 3 or 4 providers. You might now do it with your family practice providers. If you've mostly focused on your PEDS practice, you might think about going to another site within your system or to spread it across the organization. So I encourage you to sort of think about how you might not only sustain your work, right, continue what you've already put in place, but then also think about spreading it across the organization. So before I go to the next slide, I want to talk about sort of an example of spread. So I think we talked about early in our work together that Jess and I worked on an HPV project about 4 or 5 years ago here at PCHC. And we started with our rates around 13 or 14%. We've done a lot of the tests of change that you mentioned. And I've been pretty deliberate with sharing our success with the practice, have not been as deliberate with sharing our success with the other examples I gave you. But recently I just got our HPV rates that showed that they were just really outstanding and high. And so I went to the PEDS practice and showed them their data. It was not blinded, so they could see how each of them were performing. And the provider that happened to be the highest was in the room. And it was just so energizing for me. It's been like the best day I've had in a month doing this work, because to see the sort of pure joy on their face about how they've increased so dramatically, in one case from 13% to 84% of her 13-year-olds completely being immunized, both doses. And then and sort of the energy in the room where, you know, they're sort of literally patting her on the back and saying, oh my gosh, what are you doing? And her saying, well, you know, I tout this as being, you know, the very first cancer vaccine that we have. Isn't that what you know, told me to say? And it was just really gratifying to see that what we had put in place several years ago really has stuck, and it has become their sort of workflow. So it was, again, energizing for the individual providers. As a group. You know, we just sat and talked for 20 minutes about what they've done and what they're most proud of. And now they want to spread it to the rest of the organization, to the PCPs who might be seeing pediatric patients. Next slide. So just quickly, yeah, so this was just the document that I gave them, their results. And so what I showed them here was literally, you know, our average. So 68% of our 13-year-olds had both doses. The state average was 58% and the national average was 48%. And then they could see sort of each other's performance. And like I said, it was just super engaging. So since then, I've shared it with clinical leadership. I've shared this with our board. I've shared this with our executive leadership, and just the energy we get from everyone has been wonderful. Next slide. And then just our trend. So where we started right where you were, around, you know, 13%, and to see us up at 68% as an organization is just very pleasing. So kudos to all of you. You all can do the same exact thing, and I just encourage you to spread your story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. That was wonderful. Anna, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Yeah, so I'm going to take a quick pause, and I'm going to ask you to locate the chat box. And I'm going to challenge you to think of a time that you've been congratulated, whether individually or on a team, in or outside of work, and it was positive. Can you all, if you can remember a time, go ahead and write in the chat box, yes, so I know that you're visioning with me. So I'll repeat, think of a time in your life, whether it's in work or outside of work, that you've been congratulated individually or as a team, and it was done well. So I see one yes. How about the other folks? Let me see who else we got here. Even the faculty and those at the Echo Hub. Go ahead and think through it. Okay. Thanks, God, too. You were awarded an Excellence in Innovation Award. That's incredible. Okay, now think of a time that either individually or as a team in your life that you've been congratulated and it was not well received. It was not done well. If you can think of one, go ahead and write yes again. Or if it was done poorly, say no, I can't remember, you know, I can't remember a time where it was done well, or I can't remember a time where it was done poorly. So I'll ask again. Do you remember a time being congratulated and it did not go well? So I think we think of congratulations and all these things as a very obvious thing. We think of balloons. We think of streamers. Our team, we like to do cakes. Spoiler, I'm a type 1 diabetic. I don't like when we celebrate with cake because that stresses me out, right? So I want to just do this quick intro to get you in the mindset of we've done all this amazingness. We want to celebrate, whether it's manufactured or not. There's an idea of creating a moment, whether it comes organically or inorganically. You should create a moment, and curated moments can still be emotional and impactful and beautiful. So I wanted to challenge you to think through your own personal experience, because that's how we can connect with others, and take a pause when we're doing, I have studied epidemiology and science, and I have to challenge myself to take a pause and celebrate in a human way so that we can keep energized. So on the left side, so the title of the slide here, don't worry too much about the slides, just here for reference later. I wanted you to think through, how can we celebrate our progress and either plan to sustain, plan to spread, plan to stop, whatever it is that you're doing, we hope never stop. Think on the left side, considerations. These are probes based off of experiences I've had personally, but also based on the literature of things to consider when you're thinking about celebrating. The organizational culture. A really easy way to do this is to think through, how have we celebrated in the past? How's it gone well? How has it gone poorly? And use that as a guide. appropriate to the effort. You're not doing this alone. And if you are, that's horrible. And someone might have helped you out at some point. But even congratulating yourself, being acknowledged, it's hard to be alone. And if there is folks that have been part of the effort with a intensity that may vary, just acknowledging them by name, whether that be publicly or individually, writing them a letter, writing them a card, if they've helped you, because you're the lead, right? So hopefully someone's celebrating you, but sometimes the doer needs to be the celebrator too. And that leads me to the third one, personal preference, right? So I just said you can write them a card if someone is a little bit more introverted. They don't want to be called out in front of a staff meeting. That's sometimes someone's worst nightmare, but you want to acknowledge them, right? So if you want to celebrate, the idea is to make someone feel good, feel fulfilled, feel acknowledged. And so taking some time to think through their personal preference of being celebrated, even if you just ask. I know I had a colleague who did not like being called out in staff meetings, but our boss knew that she loved 1,000 grand, that like really random chocolate bar. So when she had a huge win, she'd get a chocolate bar on her desk. That sounds super weird, but it's a way that she felt fulfilled, and she was like, wow, I feel seen and heard. And so those are just a few examples to think through your own personal experience, communicating that to others of how you like to be celebrated, and taking the time to celebrate others. It can help you create a really strong team and make people want to keep working together. A few concrete examples are here on the right side of the screen, the like what section. Some summary reports of data. People are motivated maybe by data, especially those leaders, the ones that Teresa was talking about earlier. Maybe for some folks, the business case or the impact of numbers is something that is motivating to them. A staff spotlight if they like the attention. A storyboard that you can communicate to those who may not be in the same type of skill set or storytelling way that you are. Let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to show you just like 2 or 3 really quick ones. This is something, sharing your progress continuously. I know this seems like another task for you. So you have to pull the data, then you've got to make it look pretty, then you got to send it out. But considering this, the example that Teresa said was provider assessment and feedback. She created a way for them to look at their progress and have a moment to celebrate, and that was well received by the lead. It also facilitates best practice learning and positive deviance, which just means let's not focus on the folks that are underperforming. Let's focus on the ones that are performing with the same resources and learn from them. Celebrating champions. Staff highlights, incentivizing. This does not have to be monetary, but it can be if you have that available to you. Even some folks have, if they have the resources to allow someone to have a proper lunch break or leave an hour early on a Friday, something little to kind of acknowledge somebody, and then, or even just having a meeting where you acknowledge them could be a competition incentive where you're like, oh, well, this is what they're doing, I should do that too. Next slide. These ones are just storyboards. So 2 examples, I'll go super quick. Storyboard is just one way to celebrate and tell your story, because what you're doing is you're acknowledging, but you're telling your story. So it's a useful tool, and it can be presented to a variety of different people. I'm going to give you a few examples. So next slide, you'll look at a PDSA one, I believe. So this is very like bleep blurp, right? So it can be a little bit more robotic, but this is talking about a PDSA cycle, and it tells the story of what you accomplished. So this is something that you can share outside your QI team, outside of you as an individual, if you did it yourself. Just kind of show a big picture of what did you accomplish. It's a little different, almost putting your case presentation and your findings into something visual that can be presented at a meeting if that's of interest to you. Next slide. This is something a bit more visual that tells a story about a project. So this is one I just clipped off the internet from Minnesota Department of Health. I had seen someone present something like this at a meeting. It's almost like an academic poster where you tell your story from the beginning. So why are we doing this? What do we want to do? What did we do? And what are we doing next? This is just a template you'll have, and you can customize this. Next slide is my last one. This is one that our staff in Idaho created for her system. And what she did is added similar things that kind of ground us, right? What's the project? What was our aim? What are some activities that we did? Who was on our QI team? Who were our collaborators in the field or in our community? And then some pictures. So she had a crazy amount of pictures and some graphs. This is a little bit more fun and playful, and they printed this out and put it in their waiting room for staff to see, for their patients to see what they'd accomplished. So it can be done in many different ways, but I think obviously doing the work is the most important, but making sure that you're telling your story too, so that it can be spread and celebrated. I think that's all I had, but mine was about celebration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you, Teresa. So appreciate you both and so appreciate you being part of this ECHO. It's really been wonderful.